So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Uh, Let me start by telling about my own experiences. You have made a brilliant plan, but is it going to be executed? Well, I can tell you from my experience that no, nobody is going to listen to you. We have made many brilliant plans. They all fail. As a Vice Chancellor of PIDE, it was my job to provide research advice. And I found that nobody was interested in listening. And there is a reason for that. It's not that there is a reason which we will discuss. Actually, it was just today, Marc-André Franche, who was the country director of UNDP, he had an exit interview. He was leaving the country. And so he said that you cannot have an elite that takes advantage of cheap and educated labor when it comes to money, and when it's time to party, it's in London and buys things in Dubai and property. And so basically, the elite needs to decide whether they want a country or not. So the underlying problem that he has picked up is actually the most serious problem which our country faces. Do we have one country or do we have two countries? Basically, actually, this is a hangover from the period of colonization. When the bureaucratic institutions were set up, they were not meant to be representative. They were meant to be rulers of the country. They were meant to extract resources from the people by force and to give them to England. There was no question of representation because you don't want to allow people who are being exploited to be represented, to be allowed to have a voice to say that we do not like to be exploited. You just want to control them. So this institutional structure and mindset continues to this day. There is no change. In the USA, you see, they had similar. USA was also a colony of England, and they revolted on the idea that there is no taxation without representation. And that was the driving force, that we should, if we are going to be paying revenues, then we should participate in the governance. This exact same problem exists today. The central problem is that, you see, when you go and give an advice to a minister or a secretary, he doesn't need any advice because he knows exactly what to do. He knows the line of action which will give him the maximum amount of power, and that's what he's going to do. And he doesn't want to know what is best for the country unless there is a cut in it for him. And that's what Marc-André Franche said, that look, until you start looking out for the future of the country and putting that above your personal interests, then there is no hope. And he thinks that things are getting from bad to worse, and you have to decide basically whether you want a country or not. So Tariq Rahman has written a book called Denizens of Alien Worlds, which is basically describing the gap between the English-speaking elite and the Urdu-speaking population. They are basically, we are the white rulers, brown rulers, coconut class, the brown on the outside, white on the inside. This has been created expressly by Macaulay's education, which was designed to create a class which would love and admire and appreciate the English and hate and have contempt and for an inferiority complex about their own culture, which you can see so clearly, like in interviews of Hassan Nisar, who thinks that we are the abject, the cesspool of civilization. There's nothing worse than us, no inferior harm. And this is part of what is necessary narrative in order to be able to do ruthless and cruel exploitation, which was done. I mean, unless you feel that your people are animals, you can't do the kind of injustice that is required from the colonization process. So now, why is there an undocumented economy? Well, look, your elite class sends your children to Beacon House while the Awam sends them to public schools. The dogs and cats of the elite class receive much better treatment than it is possible for the dying children of the poor people to receive. And this is happening in the same country at the same time. So obviously, people want to escape the clutches of the tax collector, who is an alien. And why is tax revenue low? It's an extractive economy. People want to avoid paying taxes, and you want to go and collect it by force. What about debt? Well, we have debt to pay for imports. This is created by overvaluation, which I have circulated. There was an article of mine on Dawn on Sunday, which has been widely appreciated by. So basically what we have done is artificially kept the value of the rupee extremely high. This is called overvaluation. This allows the rich to transfer their money abroad easily. It allows them to buy cheap imports, but it makes it impossible for us to develop a local industry. So basically what we are doing is we are selling our wheat so that to buy imports, and that's how we incur debt. The fiscal deficit is divided into 3 parts. This part is a bit difficult and technical, so I will skip it. I will also skip this one. So basically the import-export imbalance comes from overvaluation, which has been maintained for a long period of time. Again, this is an elitist economy. It has led to deindustrialization of Pakistan. Why have we tried to launch a mobile industry? It failed. Why? Because mobiles are cheap. In India, they have domestic cars and they have domestic mobiles because they have maintained a correct foreign exchange policy. So basically, as I have explained in this article, when you maintain an overvalued rupee, what this means is that the government, whenever you buy dollars, the government pays part of that. That's the only way to keep your rupee overvalued. So you have a continuous need for borrowing of money in order to buy foreign goods. And so obviously you will go repeatedly keep borrowing, and your bill will, your debt will keep going up, because until you kick this habit, you cannot make change. So why is there fragmented planning and coordination? Well, basically, you see, the elite classes who rule the country, they have a money machine at their disposal. They have a cow, and and they are milking it for all they can get. And the fight is over the shares. The political parties here don't come to serve the people. They come to extract their share of the revenue in turns. And so obviously the policies are inconsistent, because one policy helps one group, the other policy there. It's just fighting over the spoils. It's not the question of common interest of the people. So now Tony, Weber, they have analyzed the rise of the West. So basically what they have said is that the key to this was a new religion which mankind adopted, which was the worship of money. And how this emerged out of Christianity is the long and complex story which they have told, which I will not describe here. I have discussed it in some of my articles. But basically, it is the spirit which drives the flesh. And so here also we are looking for solutions at the wrong levels. We are looking for solutions by installing cameras and by reforms, but the real solutions lie in our hearts. And that is what the driver is of change, is the hearts of the people. Today, this worship of money, the capitalism system, which is driving the entire world, all of us included. The education teaches us how to be a human resource. It teaches us to value money and career over everything. So everyone is for sale to the highest bidder. This is what accounts for corruption. If your goal is money, and if you make more money by doing something unethical, then you do it, because that's higher than all other ethics. So actually, when I teach, I tell my students that, look, this system of education is training you to be a human resource. I want you to learn how to be a human being. And this is something which your whole education is completely devoid of. And you are the most precious of the creations of God. And your life cannot be purchased for all of the gold in the world. You have been deceived into thinking that you are a commodity for sale in the labor market. But you are much more precious than that. So if this spirit can be created, that if we learn how to be human beings instead of having a mad pursuit for money, which is completely meaningless actually, it doesn't actually teach us how to be human beings, that is the change that is required. I'm going through the report and I looked at the minor issues like smuggling. You see, smuggling is again a consequence of undervaluation. It is possible to completely eliminate smuggling by just going to a regime of overvaluation, which has been successfully used by East Asia, Japan, China. What is overvaluation? Overvaluation is very simple. What you do is, you see, basically it's all supply and demand. If the public wants to buy $100, there are people who want to buy rupees. Now, current regime is that the people who want to buy rupees are less, so they will sell $90 and the government puts in $10 of its own cheap, borrowing it, and then this keeps accumulating debt. Instead of that, we can do the opposite, which was actually done by East Asia. What they do is when the public goes out to buy $100, the government also prints money and buys $10. So now you have put a tax on imports, which is impossible to avoid. I mean, this is you can bring in goods. You can abandon customs import duties because you have automatically put a 10% tax. And what this does, this is called the cheapest industrial policy. Now you can do import substitution, which we have been trying to do unsuccessfully for such a long time. Because when you set up your industry and you can buy cheaper imports, who's going to buy your import? But if you put up basically a barrier to imports just by this overvaluation policy, the dollar products are expensive, the local products is cheap, then you can set up your industry. And there's this famous infant industry argument which goes back to dawn of time from Germany when the German market was being flooded by cheap English imports and they were unable to industrialize, though they realized that we have to put up some barriers. So this restructuring of the government, obviously nobody wants, I mean, what you would like to do, these are the recommendations from your policy. What you would like to do, why is that department dysfunctional? It will never be functional because if you want to restructure the government to make it efficient, the only game in town is to maximize your power. So you're not going to accept restructuring if it creates efficiency unless it increases your power. But that's exactly the counterproductive argument. FDI, you see, this is really irrelevant. What we need to do is to develop our domestic resources. If FDI can help, that's good. But the focus, the ball game really is how can we help, how can we develop domestic productive capacity? And basically, all of our economic theory is the economic theory of the hitman, and it is designed to exactly to extract revenues from our countries. So colonization never ended. Today, the poorest countries of the world pay about, in the last, I have the figure, $7 trillion in payments. Mostly it's interest payments, but there are many other kinds of payments as well. So basically, we are still colonized and we still pay tribute to our foreign masters. So about the plan B, the drastic alternative is to declare economic emergency, renounce, say that we have accepted kalma and we have made tawbah and we are no longer going to pay interest. You can have the principal, but you can't have the interest. this will lead to a sovereign default. This will not be, this will not have any effect on the masses of the people, but will be very painful for the elite. That's why they will never do this. So I'm just going to go quickly over the team action plan. So raising revenue. Basically, it's all about changing the national narrative. You can never do this. I mean, there have been 3,000 initiatives to change FBR and to improve FBR, and all of them have failed. As soon as this is an extractive entity, they don't want to change things. They're deriving a huge cut from the amount of revenue they collect, and so any reform is going to be harmful to them. So basically we have to, change the mindset that one of the things is to just dismantle FBR and create alternatives. You see, it is said that no taxes. I've said this on other occasions, and people say no, taxes are always collected by force in all countries of the world. This is not true. Pakistan has a philanthropy record which is unparalleled. If you look at so people want to give money if they know that it is being used for a good purpose. So if we change the narrative that we are all in this together, this is not two nations, we are one nation, and if we show the people that we are using the money for a good cause, people are very willing to give. There are ways, you have to do this. Flat, transparent tax, zakat, basically methods of extracting, method of raising revenue which are aligned with local, cultural, social norms. Community-driven development is the key to empower communities, to give them money for their community projects. That's what we need, drivers of growth. And the government is just too small to be the engine of growth for the people. Basically, this is another mindset we have, which is hangover from colonial times, that the government is going to create growth and then the people will benefit from the fruits of the growth. This is something which Mahbubul Haq also cautioned against. He has said that this is the planning mindset that we started with, but this is not the way it works. Actually, what you do is you empower the people and they will create the growth. So all we have to do is to provide people with the ways to live with dignity and take care of their needs, and they will create the growth. But this is something which would be extremely against the colonial state, which doesn't want to give power to the people. So one of the suggestions which I have been pushing, which is a job guarantee program. This comes from modern monetary theory, which is currently a subject of major controversy in international arena, because it says things which are very contrary to what the IMF is telling us. But we can actually provide jobs to every single person who wants. And there is no resource constraint which prevents us from doing so. The standard economic theory says that if you employ everybody and give money to everybody, you will create massive inflation because you have a lot more money, but the same amount of product. But actually this doesn't take into account the fact that these people will be productively employed. If they are producing product, so if you have a lot of additional money and a lot of additional product, there will be no inflation. But this is not an easy thing to do. It requires very careful management. For example, if we were to just recruit 1 million people into the government, exactly this is what was going to happen, because these will be just running around swatting flies, and so there will be massive inflation. So you have to, but how can you employ 1 million people productively? This is a key question, and it's not easy to solve. The communities have the capability to do so, governments don't. Communities know who can do how much kind of work, and they have the possibility. And there are living communities now, thanks to Akhtar Hamid Khan and his project, which has been followed up in Pakistan. So we have many living communities which can actually be empowered if the mindset is correct. So basically the key to you see we have 70% are unskilled. So what do we need to do? The standard economic approach says that, okay, you provide them with skills, you provide them education. This means 10 years down the line we will be giving them jobs. That's hopeless. What you have to do is give the jobs to the people as they are, where they are, and provide on the job training. And there are thousands of jobs. Basically, the issue is that the jobs that make money, you see, we're all trapped by frameworks of capitalist economy, that the only job which is profitable is the one which will get. So we want the private sector to give jobs, and that cannot be done. The most valuable jobs in the society are the ones which don't pay high profits. The most important job in this society is to provide training to our children, education, a good education. This is the most valuable future, but this is not the one which has the highest payoff in terms of money. So the social benefits and the private benefits are different, and so this idea that privatization will solve problems, this is just a red herring, chimera of capitalism. All right, so privatization of SOGs will not work, but China has 70% production in the public sector. What will work is the Confucian ethic. What Confucius did was he created a group of bureaucrats who were motivated by the spirit of service, and they were efficient and competent and capable. And this is what we need. So trade balance we've already talked about. This was a very valuable suggestion from this group, that we need a stable policy framework. Economists have identified the key to rapid growth as being a fixed, stable policy framework. The people can deal with anything. You can put any kind of regime that you like, but as long as they know the framework is going to remain stable, they can find ways to cope with it. But if you keep changing the rules on them every day, then the economy cannot survive. The nudging is actually one of the experts from Dubai was here, and he discussed this with me, and I said that, you see, nudging is the right strategy for a liberal Western democracy, but in our culture, it would have to be substantially re-engineered. To just give one example, and that's the last slide and the last. You see, we are working basically as colonizers, and we are with English mindsets and English cultural norms. And one of my relatives was a doctor, and she studied the kidney donation. So she said that in the USA, it is always phrased as the gift of life. You motivate people by saying that you're going to give the gift of life to somebody else, and that's how volunteers are persuaded to donate their kidneys. Here in Pakistan, nobody talks about the gift of life. If your relative gets sick, then you are stuck. It's duty. So in our culture, duty is of paramount importance. And in their culture, this is why nudging, that, okay, you just give them a hint. Here, if we can, we have a much stronger social framework, structures. In fact, many people have argued that the extreme deprivations that our people suffer from, they're only able to do so because we have very strong social networks. So